Thanks for that, Kyle. Growth spurt. So let's talk about what's happening with Bitcoin. A lot of people are comparing what's happening with Bitcoin right now to the DeFi summer of 2020. In order to facilitate that conversation, we have Alex Miller, Hiro, Jake Margulies of Galxe, and Sankha Banerjee from Babylon, three builders, ecosystem community developers, and even like tooling gadget wizards with us today to kind of go through all the different parts of this ecosystem that are quite frankly exploding on the scene right now in terms of funding, development, VC money, interests. This is the place to be. So this might be actually the conversation of the day, in my opinion. Alex, we're going to kick it off with you and ask a question that might be a little unfair, but I'm going to make you pick. If you had to have the next big tooling set out there, or the next big tech gadget, or have a robust community, which one would you pick? I'm putting you in a catch-22 here, but which one would it be?
Sure. I mean, this isn't going to be as hard to answer as you think it is, but I'm going to go with the community side, actually. I think this is true for almost any startup, any company, anything that you're building. The demand from the user side, what people want, the engagement from them, like that is what drives what you go out and build. And so at Hiro, as you said, we're a developer tooling company. We build tools for the Bitcoin L1 and for L2, particularly stacks. The first thing we always look at is what are people trying to build? What are people already coming to us asking for? And that's where we focus our resources. So absolutely, like I'm going to take an influx of new people coming to me every day and asking for things over like, I don't know, some sexy technical innovation that nobody understands how to actually make something with that people want.
Jake, we'll get to you in a second since Galxe does focus on community development, but I do want to hear from Sankha on that part because Babylon is building an L2, or is it like adjacent, like a meta protocol to Bitcoin? It's very difficult to explain for someone who's just sort of a layman in the Bitcoin space. But you guys are obviously going for like maybe the other side of that question, right? Where you guys are going to build a community over time, obviously. But right now, you guys sort of have like the tech lead on everybody. So how do you think about this question? Would you rather have the tech or would you rather have the community? Or is this just missing the point entirely?
No, I think I'll also go with the community. And I think if you just to resonate with what Alex said, is Bitcoin is actually one of the most sticky community in crypto. So people who hold Bitcoin, they have been holding Bitcoin without really a use case when they have been seeing other ecosystems where there's a lot more innovation. So I think the Bitcoin community and anybody getting onboarded to the Bitcoin community are very precious. So as a product builder, I would definitely go for the community.
Okay, and then last but not least, Jake, your thoughts on this? I'm assuming it's community since that's what Galxe focuses on, but maybe you have a different take.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to side with everybody. It's definitely community. Tech, we believe, is the foundation, but I think community is really the lifeline. Innovation, it lays the groundwork for any Web3 platform. But the community, it breathes life into these technologies. And really, without a vibrant, engaged community, even the most revolutionary tool can become obsolete. So really, our focus is on building and nurturing communities to our platform. Interactive campaigns, they've really been the key to our sustained growth and engagement. And I think the really great thing about it is, projects of all life cycles come to Galxe, pre-product, pre-TGE, post-TGE, projects that have been around for years already, and they still need to engage with their communities, build a community, and also manage and reward their current community members, give those community members the blueprint for how they can level up, and also, help them understand and explore different parts of their ecosystem. So it's definitely the community and being able to identify, those loyal, valuable supporters that are behind all these letters and numbers in a wallet address.
Definitely. Okay, let's go to the DeFi summer aspect, which I led the show with here. DeFi summer, beginning of or middle of 2020, we saw these fruit and food tokens pop up on the Ethereum network. And at first it was kind of like a gambling thing. Maybe the whole thing was a gambling thing, but we did see some actual products launch out of that from, Aave to larger stablecoin projects like Curve, and it really did become a pretty fundamental part of what Ethereum is today. I think there's probably an argument that we're seeing that right now as well. From your guys' perspective, how similar is DeFi summer with Ethereum in 2020 versus the moment right now? And what are some lessons we can pull from that, whether that be from a community organization standpoint all the way to the tech side of things? I'll throw it right back to you, Jake. A little unfair because you just answered a question, but
Yeah, no problem.
looping
Truthfully,
back.
I really wasn't in the space for DeFi summer, but I think what I can say is, it taught us, from my understanding, the importance of building sustainable platforms rather than chasing hype. And what we do at Galxe is we emphasize on creating this value through real utility in our offerings, ensuring growth in our partners' growth is both organic and long lasting. And I think what we're really able to do is, I'll kind of circle back to being able to identify these loyal supporters. So with Galxe, you can, identify users that have traded X amount of volume, that have been active for a year, 3 months, 4 months, and have been a really, really strong social contributor. So I think, what we're able to do is give these projects and these ecosystems more data on who these users are, so they can make informed decisions and really act accordingly when they do their airdrops, or when the time is right for them to reward users. And what we're really building on the back end at Galxe, and what all these different ecosystems are able to build for themselves, is their own Web3 CRM. And throughout all, with all these different data touch points that happen within one's ecosystem, that is also part of this loyalty program. So I think just more data to identify, who they can reward and who the appropriate users are for them to reward.
Sankha, same question to you. DeFi summer, anything to learn from it? Similarities between that time and this time?
Yeah, so I want to give a little bit context to what DeFi summer meant in 2021. So first is there was the macro environments where the interest rates were zero, right? So if you have free capital floating around and you see a domain which is giving you 10%, 20%, 50%, 100% APY, you just move in there. And this is like, so one of the big alignments of 2020, 2021 was very low interest rates in the market. There were a lot of people getting cash from the government. And then these Ethereum-based protocols, which were minting stablecoin and lending operations, there was a huge interest of just liquidity mining, right? So that's where a lot of people came in. As more people came in, there was a huge amount of FOMO, and that got into the pump factor. So I don't see the same macro alignment right now. So one of the issues right now is most people would not do liquidity mining because the DeFi interest rates are very low compared to a risk-free rate. You put your money in Chase, you get 5%, right? So there's a big difference of macro misalignment. However, we have to understand like what is a good risk in crypto right now. And one of the more acceptable risk in crypto is actually staking. So if you are looking to stake your token on POS, and that's where like we at Babylon, we're finding some huge resonance with pretty much the Bitcoin as well as the POS community, because we are trying to create one of the first trustless utility vehicle for Bitcoiners. Because if you have Bitcoin, unless you're a miner, you don't really have any way to get Bitcoin on top of Bitcoin. Whereas with Babylon, what we are trying to tell is you can lock your Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain. It never leaves Bitcoin chain. And you can give voting power to POS systems so that you can make this staking yield. So for us, we see that one of the big Bitcoin DeFi aspect, which would be that we know that the interests are misaligned. However, there is a lot of yield which can be obtained either through staking or by making more utility on the Bitcoin. And that's where I think we're going to cover the L2 kind of story. But whoever is able to create utility on idle Bitcoin, I think that's going to spur the DeFi summer within the crypto ecosystem. I don't see a lot of capital coming in because of this interest misalignment. However, we are at a much stronger infrastructure foundation. Today, crypto is an accepted that people believe in crypto products. So we see a lot of institutions taking interest, and that's why they're also even interested to buy Bitcoin.
I'm going to stay with you for that same question, kind of following up, and then definitely want to go down to Alex to go back to the DeFi summer question. In terms of yield, that was a big topic in 2021, 2022, and that collapse. Everyone just thinks about Terra Luna when we think of yield and Anchor and all that. I think from a Bitcoin perspective, Bitcoiners are even more hesitant. They see yield, they're like, oh, this is not risk-free, right? And so they don't go for it. From a POS developer standpoint, how do you incentivize these Bitcoiners who they do have all this Bitcoin and they are just basically sitting on it and hodling it. How do you get them to use that capital efficiently, use that capital for another network? What's the way to onboard them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we did a lot of study on Bitcoin holders' behavior and how Bitcoin holders are hodl. This hodl in Bitcoin is actually pretty so there's a system to it. So people are not just hodling because they have nothing to do. They've understood that there's a value proposition in hodling. So one thing we found was that if we want to excite Bitcoin holders to get utility on their Bitcoin, we first have to understand the risk preferences. So anything which leaves the Bitcoin chain is majority of them are not accepting it. Second, if they have to use some kind of bridge to go to another ecosystem, they're also not planning. So fundamentally, majority of Bitcoiners have a very strong self-custodial mindset where they're extremely hesitant of external trust assumptions outside of the Bitcoin trust assumptions. So at Babylon, what we have done is we are giving the Bitcoiners that you lock your Bitcoin in your preferred way on the Bitcoin chain. Once you have locked, we have created a mechanism for you to create voting power exactly equal to this locked amount of Bitcoin, and that can be deployed on POS chains. And staking in POS chains generally can be analogized as a risk-free rate, right? Because the slashing probability is a lot lower. Again, you have to make sure you're onboarding the right custodians. We're working with Fireblock, Ledger. We're also working with a slashing company, which makes sure that random slashing doesn't happen on this Bitcoin. It's called Cubist. So we're putting the design as self-custodial plus working with very heavy infrastructure providers who have almost 10 plus years of experience in making sure that these infrastructure risks are properly monitored.
Awesome. Alex, I want to throw the question down to you that we were asking a second ago, DeFi summer then versus now. What are you seeing as some similarities between that moment and what's happening with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sankha's, the macro level analysis he was talking about, I think is spot on. There was also, I mean, mid 2021, a lot of people were still like trapped at home too and not going out. They certainly weren't traveling. It's the exact same thing that drove the whole meme stock thing on Reddit and Robinhood and all that, like the exact same dynamics. But there is also the cultural difference between the Ethereum world and the Bitcoin world. Like Ethereum world is just much more into degen shit than Bitcoiners are. And Bitcoiners, yeah, absolutely understand like risk-free rates of return and counterparty risk. So I think what gets built, what I'm already seeing getting built, what we're certainly like in the Stacks ecosystem seeing getting built is much more like real sustainable yields because yes, you can get 5% in a Chase savings account. But obviously, Bitcoiners do not want to sell their Bitcoin to move into a fiat bank account. If they did, they probably wouldn't own the Bitcoin in the first place. But it means they're also more than happy earning that same 5% or even a little bit less. Again, they're much, much more concerned with the counterparty risk and with not losing it than they are with like maximizing out and getting even 7%, let alone like the obvious scam. If someone's telling you that they are giving you 20% yield on something, they are either lying to you or they are not telling you what the actual risk is. It simply does not exist. And I think, Bitcoiners, especially the bigger Bitcoiners, are very, very wise to that. So the stuff that we're already seeing getting built, I think it'll be much more real and sustainable. But it's going to get built. Why? Because there's $1 trillion on Bitcoin, right? It is 3 times the size of Ethereum. There's absolutely going to get these things get built because Bitcoin is the closest thing we have to a real alternative financial system, a real alternative hard money. And like people both, there's demand on the side and there's demand from developers to be able to do it.
Love it. No, I definitely agree with you guys. The macro environment is certainly different. Also, no food flavored tokens so far that I've seen. So that is a notable difference between then and now. Let's sort of segue over to L2s. Bitcoin L2s, big conversation right now. I think a lot of it is because of inscriptions, and a lot of teams are taking that moment where the overtone window is broken in Bitcoin, say like, hey, we can do more things, just more expressivity. However, there's still a fundamental problem with Bitcoin. There's not enough expressivity. There's people who've been trying to work around that for quite a while, Stacks being one. And then there's some newer ideas out there, of course, runes from Casey Rotomore maybe being one of those. How are you guys looking at these L2s and sort of weighing which ones are useful or interesting, specifically from like a business standpoint? Which ones are worth spending time on, and what are some red flags that you guys are looking for? Jake, I'll throw it to you for that one. Since Galxe is, very focused on community development. At the core of community development is trust.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that we have some exciting news to share. Within the next few weeks, we'll be integrating Stacks to Galxe. We'll be entering a pretty close strategic partnership. And there's going to be a lot of fun, exciting stuff for the community and also for Stacks, where Stacks now has the opportunity to engage with 15 million unique users. And it's great for the Bitcoin ecosystem because we've integrated it, I think close to 30 different networks, most EVM and non-EVM. We've worked with over 4,500 brands. And now we have the opportunity to educate users about the Bitcoin ecosystem, Bitcoin L2, Stacks, the great work that they're doing, educational campaigns. How can we onboard these users to Stacks in the Bitcoin ecosystem? So it's a really, really, really valuable opportunity for Stacks to tap into all these different EVM chains and also the non-EVM chains that Galxe has worked with to onboard these users and show them the great tech that they've been building and amplify everything that they've been doing. So there's going to be a lot of programs that we're going to be rolling out, as I said, educational style ambassador programs. And I think with this, a lot of these, applications that are building on Stacks, we're going to be working closely with them so they can run their growth campaigns. And there's going to be NFT minting functionality, such as, complete Quest A. Obviously, these you can track and incentivize anything on Stacks. So it could be deposit, it could be swap, it could be bridge, follow Twitter. And then in return, as a user can claim an NFT badge. And what this NFT badge can really look like, it's an achievement badge. And it's going to be good for them to start building out their reputation and identity in one's ecosystem. And what we're also going to have is a loyalty point feature. And then any application on Stacks can distribute tokens directly through Galxe, any token that's available on Stacks. So we're super excited to work with Stacks and really finally enter the Bitcoin ecosystem. We supported Bitcoin addresses, as of a month ago, but now we're going to be kind of expanding our reach into that ecosystem and show our users, hey, this is what Stacks and Bitcoin is all about. So we should be making a pretty nice splash, and we're super pumped about it.
Sankha, same question to you. In terms of Babylon, a little more complex, explains to people, but as you guys are going through this process, how do you guys sort of differentiate your product versus different L2s out there? And then on a wider, maybe an engineering level, how are you looking at these different L2s right now and being like, yeah, these make sense, or no, these don't really chalk up?
So Babylon on the Bitcoin side, we are basically just using a staking script to lock the Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain. We are actually an L1 in POS, and we are a Cosmos L1. So we're an L1 on Cosmos. So our technology is modular. So whenever someone locks Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain, this voting power, which is needed for staking, that can be allocated to Cosmos chains, Polygon, any POS chain, which actually has the slashing capability. So we plan to work with a lot of different chains. And that's actually also good because we think Bitcoiners might like certain POS chain, may not like. So having this omni-chain narrative is actually better. Now, we were initially focused on getting this voting power to the POS side, but then post Stanford Blockchain Week, we started getting a lot of L2s, which were trying to build on Bitcoin, and they were trying to see that if the staking plane, which we are bringing in by locking the Bitcoin, if that can actually offer a security layer for these L2s. So some of the initial discussions we have had with the L2s was to kind of a little bit in the ideation phase in terms of how do we create slashing on the Bitcoin chain. However, I talked with Munib, and I think one of the things I definitely want to give props to Munib is for some reason and for a long period of time, right? Stacks has been kind of progressing this innovation layer on Bitcoin to bring utility. So I think I kind of feel like the more I get into these kind of conversations, I slowly feel that the community is getting very powerful. There's a lot of different experiments. So for us, right now, we think In case of Babylon, the idea is that let's say we have $1 billion of Bitcoin locked. Now that's $1 billion of Bitcoin security. Now Bitcoin itself may be worth $700 billion of security. So if you're looking at L2, which needs to go back and aggregate this consensus state machine back to the L1, they may not need $700 billion of security because that comes with its own latency. They may kind of leverage the $1 billion of Babylon security. So we're kind of a little bit in the ideation phase with some ZK rollups, some other protocols, which are trying to build L2 to see how can we give this faster confirmation to these L2s. And I had a conversation at Satoshi Roundtable with Munib. One of the things we are very excited about Stacks is the SBTC concept. And if the SBTC holders would be willing to lock their Bitcoin and then give voting power to the POS chains, right? So that's something we're trying to work with Stacks to see if there's some potential integration possibility.
Awesome. Thanks for that background on Babylon as well. Definitely a interesting and promising project coming out of 2024 compared to like a lot of the Bitcoin L2s right now, which we're like, okay, what even is this? Because there's no like fundamental part of Bitcoin that can hold these things up, which I'm going to toss it to Alex. Looking at the Stacks ecosystem, Babylon, and then like this whole other grouping of L2s, how are you classifying these things? How should someone who's walking into the Bitcoin L2 ecosystem think of these things? So should we accept tokens for these projects? Should we not accept tokens? What do we need to see on Bitcoin to change? I'll let you kind of take it where you want, but obviously this is kind of blue ocean for a lot of people, and it's rife with scams and sharks.
Yeah, so if there's one thing that Bitcoiners love, it is arguing over technical definitions about what something is. Is it a sidechain? Is it a L2? Is it not? Whatever. Those debates are never going to end, and nobody's ever going to agree on anything. What I'll say is, I think right now spotting the scams in, the folks who are just like trying to free ride on Bitcoin L2s are so hot right now is actually pretty easy. Look at how long they've been doing it. They started up, especially in like the last couple months. If they announced something yesterday and they have 100,000 plus Twitter followers on their account, it's probably a scam. Like again, a lot of lessons actually. And you know what? This is something we can learn from DeFi Summer. There's a pretty good fingerprint on what something looks like if it's unreliable. There's a lot of folks who've been building in Bitcoin. Obviously, the Stacks ecosystem, led by Munib, has been around a long time. RSK, Lightning, there are plenty of folks who've been around a long time in it. So absolutely, like, if it smells like bull, it probably is. I think from a technological perspective, like, there is a huge shortcoming for Bitcoin in that so little computation is capable on the L1. And that's the reason that like we have been, thinking about and building Stacks from the technological perspective that we have, where they're all, yes, it's got its own chain that's an L2 on top of Bitcoin, but that's what's necessary to really make something that can actually have the fully expressive smart contracts. And that's what we think is necessary for taking off building on Bitcoin and really making it go and unlock all of the potential for it. So we've taken a lot of heat from a lot of people for some of those technical decisions and for what the community's decided to do and how they've decided to go about it. But we think fundamentally it's really the most powerful structure. There's some really interesting stuff that's happening directly on the L1 using the programmability that does exist. Obviously, ordinals really is what gets credit for kicking off this entire year of like incredible innovation that we're seeing on Bitcoin. It really unlocked everyone's imagination about what's possible. Follow that up 6 months later with the BitVM paper. And actually, I was just chatting with Super Testnet earlier today. And like, we think there's going to be amazing ways actually to use BitVM and kind of that challenger prover model to unlock an even greater level of security on the L1 for things like the SBTC peg that Sankha was mentioning that we have on Stacks. So it's a very interesting situation where, a lot of the ideas of, you look at like a lot of the roll-up stuff that people want to do, and like, it's probably just not going to work on Bitcoin because there's no way to actually do the true verification that you can do on Ethereum there. but it doesn't mean that there aren't, some really incredible technical models that have been come up with by really creative and really capable people that we're seeing work. And that's really just what we're focused on unlocking and enabling developers with today.
We got about 3 minutes left here. And Alex, you've been pulling out a thread I want to keep on, and that's like, what do we need to see change in Bitcoin, or do we need to see any changes in Bitcoin to allow for DeFi summer, or maybe even just like more applications? Doesn't necessarily have to be DeFi, but some sort of application. What are some things? And I'll contextualize that with, in Ethereum, we saw a lot of different EIPs go through because of DeFi projects. Some of them failed, some of them went through. I think like EIP 1559 is like an easy example, right? Where like a lot of people are aping into a token or something like that, and there was fee pressure. And so Ethereum developers took that seriously, and they changed the protocol in order to make it a little better user experience. Is there something we could see with Bitcoin? Maybe it's like OpCat, OpCTV, or something else. And would that even be like beneficial for the Bitcoin community, or would that be a net negative?
Yeah, so obviously the two big debates right now are OpCat or OpCTV. I will say, I think from a general perspective, the ossification of Bitcoin to at least a solid degree is a good thing. I think Bitcoin is not a chain that should be rapidly innovating on the L1 and trying to push in a bunch of new stuff. It's very much let people build on the L2s, let them figure out this stuff, figure out models that work, and that the demand and the need for it is there. And then once that's done, okay, then we have the conversation about what BIPs should go through. But I definitely don't think that Bitcoin should be doing, let's call it speculative BIPs on like, well, maybe this thing will help it grow. No, Bitcoin is reliable because Bitcoin is reliable and doesn't change that much. And like, that's what people want from it. That's what's really necessary for it to be a stable alternative financial system. And we don't want to take the risk of doing, really groundbreaking stuff. Like that's what we should be doing on the L2s. That's what we should be doing on side chains. And then cool, we figure out the need, we figure out that there's the demand for the need. And that's when we can make, the small incremental upgrades to it to enable better scaling and better capabilities.
So I've got the same question to you. We got about 2 minutes left, so I'll give you guys each a few seconds to answer that.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with Alex that I think experimenting with L1 with having a kind of a very definitive opinion could be very risky, because I think one of the precious asset which we have at Bitcoin is actually the censorship resistant, almost like undoubted history over the last 10 plus years. So the innovation layer can really happen at L2. However, I think I just want to highlight one thing which at some point the Bitcoin holders need to. So right now, the governance in Bitcoin is really through the developers, because they are thinking of upgrading or something. So fundamentally, the more innovations come in, and I agree with Alex's paradigm that let the innovations happen at L2, let them create an economy. And at some point, the economy becomes so big that some of the good benefits need to be transformed back to the L1. However, I think a bigger narrative question, which I would like to leave in, is what does Bitcoin governance mean, right? Like, do the developers decide how the economy is going to be shaped, or does the people who are believing in that economy get to decide on what the economy should be? So that is something I would like as we do these conferences, as we do these discussions, that what does Bitcoin governance mean?
Okay, Jake, we'll give you the last word on this one. From a community development standpoint at Galxe, what are you guys looking for from a Bitcoin development perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll leave it off just saying we're looking for Bitcoin developers to help educate users who aren't familiar with Bitcoin. How do they get onboarded to the ecosystem? How do they create a wallet? What are the next steps? How can they educate themselves? And how can we amplify what's going on Bitcoin to these users who may not have been too familiar with it yet, to help them get familiar with what's going on.
Sankha, Jake, Alex, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate that. Kyle, will bring you back up on deck. Thank you so much for joining today, guys. Appreciate it.